a golden retriever, a crying kitten, and a hug that left even the vet in tears. What started as a mysterious act of kindness turned into one of the most powerful stories of love, loss, and healing you'll ever hear. This is a journey of two broken hearts, one furry, one tiny, that found each other when they needed it most. And what happened next will stay with you long after the final scene. Before we dive into this unforgettable true story, make sure to subscribe to Pawprints Forever for more heartwarming animal tales. Like this video to support these inspiring stories, and leave a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. Your love keeps these stories alive. Now let's begin. The first time Dr. James Mallory saw the dog, it wasn't in a cozy living room or a bright exam room. It was in the rain, outside his clinic door, pressing its nose gently against a box left on the concrete steps. It was a quiet, grey morning in the small town of Willow Ridge. The storm had rolled in overnight, leaving puddles in the parking lot and a bite in the air. James had just unlocked the front door of Willow Ridge Veterinary Center when he noticed the shadow by the planter. His eyes narrowed and he stepped closer. A golden retriever sat perfectly still in the drizzle, his fur soaked through, eyes calm but haunted. And at his feet was the box. James approached slowly, kneeling. The dog didn't move. When he reached out and lifted the flaps, his heart gave a sharp jolt. Inside was a tiny grey kitten, shivering, crying weakly, barely old enough to be away from its mother. And yet, this wasn't a random rescue. There was something in the way the dog had placed himself beside the box. Something protective, intentional. "Hey there, buddy," James whispered, reaching to stroke the dog's soaked head. "You bring her here?" The retriever whined softly, and then, in the most unexpected gesture, leaned into the box and pressed his head gently against the kitten. A hug. James blinked, stunned. The kitten let out a weak mew but didn't recoil. The dog stayed like that, calm, connected, as if trying to ease whatever pain lived in that tiny body. James looked around. No leash, no collar, no sign of an owner, but the message was clear. He wasn't leaving, not without her. Back inside, James and his assistant Molly worked quickly. The kitten was underweight, dehydrated, and cold. They placed her in a heated incubator wrapped in soft towels with a slow drip of fluids and kitten milk formula. "She wouldn't have made it through the morning," Molly murmured, her hand over her mouth. James glanced out the window. The golden retriever was sitting just beyond the glass, still soaked, eyes fixed on the clinic door. "We need to bring him in," James said. They opened the side door and gently coaxed him inside. He didn't resist. In fact, the moment he heard the kitten's cry from the back room, he bolted toward it, tail low but wagging slowly, like a worried parent. "He's not going anywhere without her," Molly said quietly. James knelt and scanned the retriever's body. No visible injuries. Slightly underweight, no microchip. But the eyes, those deep, amber eyes, held stories James couldn't yet begin to guess. They placed him in a kennel beside the recovery unit where the kitten slept. And as soon as he was close enough, he laid down, nose pressed gently against the clear wall. The kitten mewed once. The dog let out a soft sigh, and then both of them drifted into sleep, connected, safe, together. Hours passed. The clinic bustled with appointments, phone calls, deliveries. But every staff member, every single one, found themselves sneaking glances toward the back, unable to tear their eyes from the strange, touching pair. Molly eventually said what they were all thinking. "He's not just some stray who stumbled onto a box. He knew her. He brought her here." James nodded, arms crossed, mind racing. But how? And why? As if in answer, the kitten stirred. She let out a high, broken meow that cracked the stillness of the room like glass. The retriever stood up instantly, pressed against the glass, whimpering softly. James opened the latch without thinking. The dog padded in carefully, lay down beside the incubator, and, like before, rested his head beside the kitten. She quieted almost immediately. Molly choked back a gasp. James turned away, rubbing his eyes. "This isn't just loyalty," he whispered. "There's something else going on here." And he knew, deep in his gut, that until they understood why, they had to keep them together. By day 2, the golden retriever had claimed a corner of the clinic as his own. James set up a soft bed and placed the kitten's warming crate nearby. The dog refused to stray more than a few feet from her, eating only when coaxed and sleeping only when the kitten did. Molly, who had seen all manner of animals pass through Willow Ridge Veterinary Center in her 5 years at the front desk, was the first to start calling him Tucker. "Feels like a Tucker," she said with a shrug as she spooned wet food into a bowl. "Gentle, solid, loyal." The name stuck. James tried for a while to find the owner. He posted a few pictures online. Tucker sitting stoically next to the kitten, nose almost touching the incubator glass. But no one came forward. No tags, no chip. No one in town recognized him. But Tucker didn't seem lost. He seemed purposed, as if he had been sent. The kitten, meanwhile, was gaining strength. Molly had named her Lily. Tiny, grey and wide-eyed, Lily had begun standing on wobbly legs, mewing more frequently and responding to touch. She still shivered occasionally in her sleep, but the frantic cries had lessened. Her breathing was stronger, her heart rate steadier. And every time she stirred, Tucker was there. He'd rise from his bed, nose pressed close, tail wagging in a slow, rhythmic sweep. And if she cried, he would rest his chin beside her until she calmed. More than once, James or Molly would walk in to find the pair asleep side by side. No barriers, no training, no caution tape separating predator from prey, just trust, bond, love. It was on the 4th day that James began asking himself the harder questions. "Why is he doing this?" he muttered, pacing his office late in the evening. Molly looked up from her laptop. "Some dogs have strong nurturing instincts." "Sure," James said, "but this isn't just a protective reaction, it's emotional. Watch him. He's grieving." Molly raised an eyebrow. "You think he lost someone?" James nodded slowly. "Maybe another kitten. Maybe a person." He paused, then added, "There's trauma in his eyes, Molly. Not fear, not confusion, sadness, deep, human-like grief." Molly didn't argue, because she had seen it too. That night, as the clinic lights dimmed and the rest of the town tucked in under the velvet sky, James sat beside the kennel and watched Tucker and Lily sleep. She was curled against his chest, tucked beneath one of his massive paws. He wasn't holding her. He was hugging her, protectively, possessively, like someone holding on to something they almost lost. James swallowed the tightness in his throat. He knew grief. He'd buried his wife 3 years earlier after a sudden aneurysm took her in her sleep. And he remembered, vividly, what it felt like to hold on to something. Not because you thought it would last, but because you didn't know how to let go. By the end of the week, Lily was strong enough to move out of the warming crate and into a padded basket that sat beside Tucker's bed. The moment she was placed in it, she climbed out, staggered across the blanket, and collapsed into Tucker's side with a sleepy sigh. He licked her gently, and then, as if guided by something unseen, he nudged her closer with his snout and curled his whole body around her. Not trapping, cradling. James caught the moment on his phone. Later, when he watched it again alone, he noticed something he hadn't the first time. The way Tucker blinked slowly, just after Lily settled into sleep. A blink filled with weight, with memory. And then a tear, real, unmistakable, slid from the corner of the retriever's eye and soaked into the fur below. James sat frozen, because dogs didn't cry that way. Not unless something ran very deep, not unless something was buried beneath layers of fur and loyalty, something that hadn't healed. Yet. On the 7th morning, the sun finally broke through the rain clouds that had clung to Willow Ridge all week. James arrived early to check on Tucker and Lily, his steps softer than usual. He had spent most of the night tossing and turning, replaying the moment he'd captured on his phone. The tear, the blink, The way Tucker had gently curled his body around the kitten like she was the last thing in the world that mattered. He didn't know what kind of life Tucker had before he arrived, but he was determined to find out. He stepped into the back room and stopped short. Tucker was awake and alert, tail sweeping slowly across the blanket, and nestled beside him, Lily was wide-eyed and purring, her tiny paws kneading his side like he was her mother. "She's thriving," Molly said as she joined him with a fresh bowl of water. "We ran her blood work. She's past the danger zone. Weight's up. Lungs are clear." "And Tucker?" James asked, crouching down. Molly smiled. "I think his heart is healing just as fast as hers." James nodded slowly. "Maybe. But I need to know more." He reached over and ran his fingers gently through Tucker's fur, feeling along his side, ribs, spine. That's when he noticed it. A faint indentation around Tucker's neck, barely visible but unmistakable once you found it. A scar. James's brow furrowed. "He used to wear a collar. A tight one," he said. Molly leaned in. "You think he was dumped?" "Possibly. Or maybe someone cut it off before he left. Either way, someone had him. For a long time." That small clue set something off inside James. He walked over to the computer and opened the local missing pet database. Then he expanded it to include nearby counties, and he started to search. Later that afternoon, something unexpected happened. A young woman came into the clinic, holding a flyer and looking nervous. Her name was Lauren, and she was a volunteer with a nearby animal shelter. She'd seen the viral post Molly had shared days earlier of Tucker and Lily sleeping side by side, tucked into one another like puzzle pieces. "I think I've seen that dog before," she said, placing the flyer on James's desk. It was an old listing, not even digital, a printed, water-stained piece of paper from nearly a year ago. James stared at it. The photo was grainy, but the dog was unmistakable. Same amber eyes, same face, same soulful expression. "Tucker?" James asked. Lauren shook her head. "His name was Harvey. He belonged to a single father and his little girl. They lived in a cabin north of here." "What happened?" James asked. "The father died suddenly. Car accident. The little girl was placed in foster care. The shelter said Harvey ran away a few days later. No one could find him." James felt the breath leave his lungs. Lauren continued. "We think he was trying to find her. Or maybe he just didn't want to be anywhere without her." James glanced back toward the kennel. Tucker, Harvey, was curled around Lily, eyes closed, content. It hit him then like a wave. He had already lost one child, and now he had found another. That evening, James sat on the floor beside Tucker. "You're Harvey, huh?" he whispered. "You've been carrying all that love around with nowhere to put it." The dog lifted his head and looked at him, not with confusion, but with understanding. James blinked hard and reached out to stroke his head. "You don't have to hurt alone anymore. She's safe. And so are you." The discovery that Tucker's real name was Harvey changed everything. James updated the shelter registry, noting that Harvey had been found, alive, well, and now deeply bonded to a kitten he clearly saw as his own. The shelter responded quickly, confirming the details. The little girl, the car accident, the separation. No one had come to claim Harvey. No one had followed up. It was as if he'd slipped between the cracks of the system, until now. "Do you think he remembers her?" Molly asked softly, watching Harvey from the break room window. James stood beside her, arms folded. Every single day. Harvey lay on his side, Lily stretched out across his chest, his paw curled protectively over her back. "He lost his girl," James said quietly. "And then he found another soul who needed him just as much," Molly exhaled. "He never stopped being a protector." As Lily grew stronger, her personality bloomed. She became playful, pouncing on Harvey's wagging tail, mewing dramatically for attention, and curling up on the thickest part of his golden coat for naps. Harvey let her. More than that, he welcomed her. He'd push toys toward her gently with his nose, sit patiently while she battered at his ears. Even when she startled herself with her own tiny sneezes, he'd nuzzle her comfortingly. It was parenting, no question about it. And to everyone at the clinic, it was the most natural, beautiful thing in the world. One morning, James walked into the exam room and froze. Harvey was whining, low, insistent, pacing beside Lily's bed. She was curled tight, trembling, her breath coming in shallow gasps. James rushed over and scooped her into his hands. Fever. High. "Get a heating pad and the antibiotics," he called to Molly. "Now." Harvey barked once, loud and urgent, and then whimpered again, pressing his nose against Lily's tiny back. "It's okay," James whispered. "We caught it early. She's just fighting off something." But his heart pounded. They had come too far. He couldn't lose her now. Not after all this. For the next 12 hours, James and Molly took turns monitoring her. Harvey never left her side. He refused to eat, refused to sleep. When she whimpered, he whimpered too. When she stirred, he stood alert. And when she grew still again, he pressed his face to hers, nose to nose, until her breathing calmed. James watched it all, barely holding himself together. He knew Harvey had already survived a heartbreak that most animals, and most humans, couldn't. He couldn't go through that again. Losing Lily would break him. Then, just after midnight, Lily's breathing changed. It slowed, then deepened. Her trembling stopped, and her little paw reached forward, pressing gently into the thick fur on Harvey's neck. James smiled through his tears. "She's going to be okay." Molly let out a shaky laugh and leaned against the wall. "She's stronger than she looks." James nodded. And so is he. The next morning, the clinic was quiet. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, bathing Harvey and Lily in soft gold. They were both asleep. Lily curled into the crook of Harvey's belly, Harvey's head resting protectively on her side. They looked like they had never belonged anywhere else but in that exact moment, together, safe, home. By the following week, Lily was not just healthy, she was thriving. She zipped through the clinic like a puff of grey wind, leaping onto shelves, scaling chairs, and tumbling off counter edges into Harvey's waiting paws. Her tiny cries of delight echoed down the halls, often followed by the soft thump of Harvey's tail wagging. "She's fearless," Molly laughed one morning as Lily launched herself from the exam table directly onto Harvey's back. Harvey didn't flinch. Instead, he gave her a gentle shake, just enough to send her sliding down his side like it was a kitten amusement park. Lily let out a delighted squeak and immediately raced back up to do it again. James leaned on the doorway, watching them. "She's not afraid of anything," he said. "Because she knows she's loved," Molly replied. James nodded slowly. And maybe Harvey's learning that too. Word had spread throughout Willow Ridge. A few pictures from Molly's social media, especially one of Lily snuggled under Harvey's ear, had gone semi-viral. Visitors started stopping by the clinic just to see the pair. Parents brought children. Elderly couples lingered outside the glass windows. There was something about the image of this golden retriever and his tiny grey shadow that captured hearts. They weren't just adorable. They were healing. They were hope. One rainy evening, as the clinic closed for the night, James sat alone with Harvey while Lily dozed on a warm towel nearby. "You came here for a reason," James said softly, scratching behind Harvey's ears. "I don't think you just found your way by accident. I think you knew she needed you." Harvey blinked slowly, eyes thoughtful. James glanced at the framed photo on the desk, his late wife smiling in the sun, arm wrapped around a younger James. He swallowed hard. "And maybe I needed you too." The silence was warm. Lily stirred. Harvey turned instantly, pressing his nose to her back. She settled again. The following morning brought something unexpected. A letter, delivered by hand. James opened it cautiously. Inside was a note and a photo. The note read, "We saw the video of the dog and the kitten online. My niece saw the golden retriever and burst into tears. She said, 'That's Harvey. That's my Harvey. She's been with us since my brother passed last year. She's only 8. She hasn't smiled like that since the accident.'" James's hands began to shake. He flipped the photo over. It was old, but unmistakable. Harvey, a little girl with freckles, hugging his neck with both arms, and Harvey's eyes, soft, calm, just like now. James sat down hard in his chair. It was real, all of it. He called the number listed in the letter. The woman's name was Diane, the sister of Harvey's former owner. She lived 2 towns over. They spoke quietly for a long time, about Harvey, about the accident, about the little girl, Sophie, and how she had cried for weeks after losing him. "I didn't think he'd survived," Diane said softly, but Sophie never stopped believing he'd come back. James looked at Harvey, who was now curled up beside Lily, licking her tiny ears as she purred. "I don't know what to say," James whispered. "Can we come see him?" James hesitated. "He's bonded to the kitten," he said carefully. "They're inseparable." Diane paused. "Then maybe we should meet both of them." The next morning the clinic felt different. Not in a bad way, just quieter, like the building itself was holding its breath. James couldn't stop thinking about the girl in the photograph. Sophie, just 8 years old, already burdened with the kind of grief most adults couldn't bear. And now, after all this time, she was about to be reunited with the dog she thought she'd lost forever. If Harvey remembered her, and James was sure he did, it would be a moment no one in the room would ever forget. Harvey didn't sense anything unusual yet. He went about his morning routine with Lily. A short walk around the property, a careful sniff of her tiny ears, then a nap with her curled under his chin like always. Lily purred louder these days. She'd grown, but was still small enough to disappear under Harvey's paw. Still his baby. Still his mission. The car pulled into the lot just before 11 a.m. James stepped outside and spotted Diane first. Tall, kind eyes, her grey sweater pulled tight against the breeze. Beside her stood Sophie, freckled, small, clutching a picture frame close to her chest. She looked up at the clinic, eyes scanning the front windows, heart clearly pounding. James stepped forward gently. "You must be Sophie." She nodded, unable to speak. "You ready?" She looked up at her aunt, who gave her a quiet smile. "Okay," Sophie whispered. Inside, James asked Molly to wait in the lobby, giving the family privacy. He led Sophie and Diane into the back room, where Harvey and Lily were lounging peacefully. Sophie's breath hitched the moment she saw him. "Harvey?" she whispered. The dog's head lifted. His ears twitched. Then, his entire body froze. His nose lifted, sniffing the air, and then slowly, Harvey rose to his feet. He turned, locked eyes with Sophie, and whimpered. Low, sharp, heart-wrenching. Sophie dropped the photo frame, rushing forward. "Harvey!" She threw her arms around his neck and burst into tears, burying her face in his fur. Harvey whimpered again, higher now, his body trembling as he leaned into her, tail wagging furiously, tongue licking her tear-streaked cheeks. James had to turn away. Even Diane gasped, hands over her mouth. It wasn't just a reunion. It was a miracle. Lily stirred in the basket, confused at the commotion. She let out a small mew. Harvey turned instantly, nuzzling her once to reassure her before nudging Sophie gently toward the basket. "This is Lily," James said softly. Sophie knelt down, peering inside. "She's so tiny." "She was barely alive when Harvey brought her to us," James explained, "and he's never left her side since." Sophie reached out gently and stroked Lily's head. "He's still protecting someone." Harvey licked Lily once, then pressed himself between them, protective, gentle, as if to say, "She's mine, but you're still my girl too." They sat there for almost an hour, Sophie with her arms wrapped around Harvey, Lily tucked against his belly, Diane and James watching with tears in their eyes. When it came time to leave, Sophie hesitated. "Does he have to stay?" James knelt beside her. "Harvey has made a home here, and Lily needs him right now. But that doesn't mean you can't see him, or visit, or write." Sophie nodded slowly, eyes brimming. Then she leaned in and whispered something in Harvey's ear. He closed his eyes and nuzzled her softly, like a promise. Outside, Diane took James aside. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know how this happened, but you gave her a piece of herself back." James nodded, barely holding his voice steady. "He gave us all something we didn't know we needed." As they drove off, James looked through the window one last time. Harvey had returned to Lily's side. She pressed her nose into his chest. He wrapped his paw around her once more. Still hugging, still healing, still home. The days that followed Sophie's visit were peaceful, yet filled with a gentle kind of longing. Harvey was different. Not in how he cared for Lily, but in how he moved, how he watched the door. Every time the front bell chimed, he lifted his head just a little faster. Every footstep made him pause, ears alert, hope flickering in his eyes. He missed her. Even in finding a new purpose with Lily, some part of Harvey had awakened again when Sophie hugged him. A memory unearthed, a thread that had once been severed, now suddenly dangling again. James noticed it all. He watched as Harvey took Lily on longer walks around the back garden, more protective than ever. If Lily mewed too loudly, Harvey rushed to her. If she chased a leaf too far, he herded her back gently. But when the clinic quieted down and no one came through the front door for hours, Harvey would sit near the window, staring out, waiting, not unhappy, just wondering. Lily was thriving. She'd grown stronger, more adventurous, and undeniably attached to Harvey. She refused to sleep anywhere unless she could press against him. Her favorite new hobby was riding on his back, climbing up his spine and curling around his neck like a purring scarf. Molly snapped a photo of it one afternoon and captioned it, "Chauffeur and security detail in one." The photo quickly gained thousands of shares online. Comments poured in, "I can't stop crying. This is the purest thing I've seen all year. This dog is an angel. We don't deserve animals. And this is the love the world needs right now." James knew it wasn't just the image. It was the story underneath, the pain, the loss, the unspoken grief that Harvey carried, and the kitten who somehow healed it. 3 weeks after Sophie's visit, a letter arrived at the clinic, handwritten, carefully folded, with a tiny pressed flower tucked inside. James unfolded it and read, "Dear Dr. James, I miss Harvey every day. I know he has Lily now and she needs him. But if it's okay, I'd like to come visit again. I drew him something. I hope he remembers me forever, even if I can't be with him every day. Thank you for loving him too. Love, Sophie." James folded the letter and slipped it into his desk drawer, hand resting over it for a moment. Then he turned to Molly. "Let's set something up." Sophie arrived the next Saturday morning, a small backpack on her shoulders and a shy smile tucked behind her freckled cheeks. Diane trailed behind, holding a small container of homemade cookies. Harvey heard them before James could even say a word. He bolted from the back room, straight to the front door, and when it opened, a single whimper escaped. Sophie dropped her bag, threw her arms around him, and whispered, "I missed you so much." Harvey whimpered again, licking her face, tail wagging uncontrollably, body trembling with joy. Lily peeked from around the corner. She mewed once. Harvey turned, barked once, gentle, almost like an introduction. And Sophie gasped. She got so big. The three of them spent the entire day together. Sophie brushing Harvey's coat, playing with Lily, drawing pictures in the corner of the office. She gave James one to hang in the clinic, a crayon drawing of a golden dog hugging a grey kitten under a rainbow. In big block letters she'd written, "Family isn't always who you start with. Sometimes it's who finds you." James didn't even try to hide the tears that time. Weeks passed since Sophie's visit, and the bond between Harvey and Lily had only deepened. James and Molly watched as Harvey's protective instincts blossomed even further, as though every moment with Lily was an opportunity to show her how deeply he cared. He stayed close to her during playtime, nudging her gently when she stumbled, or guiding her with his nose when she got too far from the safety of the clinic. Lily, for her part, adored Harvey completely. She followed him everywhere, mewing happily as if he were her world. She snuggled into him at every opportunity, curling into his soft fur at night, her tiny paws seeking his warmth. Their connection was undeniable, and it filled the clinic with an overwhelming sense of peace. But there was still something unresolved in James's heart. He couldn't stop thinking about the first time he saw Harvey. The way the dog had waited outside his clinic door, soaked to the bone, with that tiny, shivering kitten by his side. James had felt something stir inside him that day, something he couldn't quite explain. And the more he thought about it, the more certain he became that there was more to Harvey's story than met the eye. One rainy afternoon, James finally had the chance to sit down with Diane. She'd been in touch a few times, keeping up with Harvey's progress, but she hadn't visited since Sophie's letter. They sat in the waiting room sipping coffee as the storm rumbled outside. "I've been meaning to ask," James began, his voice steady. "You mentioned Harvey's original family, Sophie's father. How did he die?" Diane's face softened, a deep sadness in her eyes. "It was a car accident. It happened suddenly, just a few months after Sophie's mother passed. He was the only one left, and it hit her hard. She didn't understand what had happened to her family, and Harvey was always there, the only constant in her life. But after he ran away..." She trailed off, her voice tight. "Sophie never gave up on him. She believed he would come back." James looked at Diane, a gentle understanding in his eyes. "And Harvey never forgot her." Diane nodded. "No, he didn't. He couldn't." James took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words. He hadn't realized how closely intertwined Harvey's grief had been with Sophie's. The dog hadn't just been abandoned by his family. He had lost a piece of himself when Sophie left, and yet despite that pain, Harvey had kept going. He had kept looking, kept hoping that he would find his girl again. "That's why he never stopped trying to protect her," James said softly, more to himself than to Diane. She smiled sadly. Yes, he was always her protector. As the weeks turned into months, Harvey's attachment to Lily didn't wane. But there was something else, something that began to emerge with every passing day. It was as if Harvey was not just protecting Lily, but also healing her. The little kitten, once frail and sickly, had grown into a spirited young cat, full of life and curiosity. She had become just as reliant on Harvey as he had been on her. One morning, as James walked through the clinic's back door, he was met with a sight that made him pause. Lily was sitting in Harvey's lap, nuzzled under his chin, her tiny body curled comfortably in the nook of his golden fur. Harvey wasn't just lying there. He was resting too. James smiled quietly. For the first time since the moment Harvey had entered his life, the dog seemed at peace. The nervous tension he'd carried, perhaps from his past, perhaps from his loss, had faded. Harvey had found a new purpose, and in doing so, he had found something he hadn't realized he needed: love. That evening the clinic was quiet, and the rain had finally stopped. James sat at his desk, glancing at the file on Harvey and Lily. There was still a part of him that couldn't shake the weight of the past, the tragedy that had brought Harvey to his door. But he also knew something powerful was at play here. Harvey had come to Willow Ridge for a reason, not just to find a home, but to show them all the power of unconditional love, the kind of love that wasn't just about saving lives, it was about healing them. And in return, Lily had given him something just as profound. She had given him a chance to love again. The next day, Diane called James. She wanted to come back. She had a question. "Can Sophie bring Harvey home?" she asked hesitantly. "She's been asking about him every night." James hesitated for a moment. He could feel the tightness in his chest. The clinic had become Harvey's sanctuary, his second chance at life. But at the same time, he knew it was time to let go. "Maybe it's time," James said quietly. "But we'll need to talk about what's best for both of them." When Sophie and Diane arrived, it was clear that Sophie had grown. The little girl who had once clung to Harvey like a lifeline was now stronger. Her eyes had softened, and the edges of her grief had been worn down by the time that had passed. But when she saw Harvey, her Harvey again, all the years of separation seemed to fade in an instant. Sophie ran to him, tears already brimming in her eyes. "Harvey!" she cried, her voice cracking. Harvey wagged his tail, rising to meet her, and for a moment the world stood still. Harvey met Sophie halfway, his golden fur rippling with each stride as he bounded across the clinic floor. The room went silent as he reached her, then crumpled gently to his haunches so she could wrap her arms around his neck. He whimpered once, deep and soft, and buried his face into the side of her chest. Sophie sobbed into his fur, her small fingers clinging tightly like she was holding the last piece of her past. "I missed you so much," she whispered. Harvey didn't move, didn't blink. He just held her, the way only he could, the way he once had in the back of her father's pickup truck on long, quiet drives, the way he used to curl beside her when nightmares gripped her tiny shoulders after her mum died, the way he knew love before words could explain it. And now he was holding her again, back from the edge, back home. James stepped quietly to Diane's side as they watched. "Are you sure she's ready for him?" Diane nodded, tears in her eyes. "She's more than ready, but only if he's ready too." They all looked toward Harvey, who was still wrapped around Sophie. Lily watched from the edge of her perch, her wide green eyes unblinking, and then, in the smallest, gentlest moment, Lily jumped down and walked over. She nudged Harvey's leg, then Sophie's hand. Sophie gasped softly, "Lily." James knelt down. "She's his heart now, Sophie. They've been through everything together." Sophie sat cross-legged, resting her hand beside Lily. The kitten walked into her lap and curled up instantly. Sophie's eyes lit up. "She's so soft." Harvey sat beside them, eyes bouncing between them both, watchful, proud, full of purpose. For the next hour, James explained everything: Lily's recovery, Harvey's behavior, the unbreakable bond between them. He spoke carefully, honestly, about how Harvey had changed since Lily came into his life, how he had come to the clinic not just with grief, but with determination. He hadn't just found Lily, he'd chosen her, and Lily had chosen him too. "They've saved each other," James said quietly, "and it's not my place to separate them now." Diane and Sophie listened intently, and when James looked down, Lily had stretched across Sophie's legs, purring loudly as Harvey lay beside them both. That night, after Sophie and Diane left with promises to return again soon, James sat at his desk, the clinic quiet around him. Molly stood in the doorway, arms crossed gently. "So," she said, "are we doing this?" James looked up. "Doing what?" "Finding them a home, together." He hesitated, and then nodded. "Yes." The next few days were a flurry of preparation. Diane offered to open her home, not just to Harvey, but to Lily too. She lived in the countryside with a fenced yard and space to grow. More importantly, she understood the depth of what was being entrusted to her. "This isn't just adoption," she said during one of the visits. "It's guardianship. It's family." Sophie agreed, and so they began the transition slowly. Overnights, weekends. Lily was unsure at first, hesitant to leave the clinic, uncertain of the world beyond, but as long as Harvey was with her, she adjusted, she explored, she played, and when Sophie joined them, the three became inseparable. On their final day at the clinic, James held a quiet farewell. The staff gathered in the back room where Harvey and Lily had first been found. Molly brought in a small cake with paw prints drawn in icing. James crouched before Harvey and scratched gently under his chin. "You saved her," he said, "and you healed something in all of us too." Harvey wagged his tail and leaned his head into James's chest. Then James turned to Lily. "You gave him a reason to love again." She blinked, slow and content, before rubbing her face against his leg. As Diane and Sophie loaded Harvey and Lily into the car, James stood beside the clinic's front door, hand resting on the frame. They were leaving together. The golden retriever, with eyes like honey and a heart bigger than any he'd ever known, and the grey kitten he had carried from death to life, together, as they were always meant to be. It didn't take long for the quiet house on Maple Hollow Road to feel like home. Diane, true to her word, had prepared every inch of it for Harvey and Lily, from cozy beds near the fireplace to soft steps so Lily could climb to the windowsills and watch the birds. Sophie made sure their toys came with them, including Harvey's favourite squeaky duck and Lily's tattered mouse plush that still smelled faintly of the clinic. The first night, Harvey paced a little. He walked the perimeter of each room, Lily trailing close behind, both unsure but curious. But when Sophie called softly from the living room, Harvey padded in, sat beside her, and let out a low, contented sigh. Lily leapt onto his back and curled around his neck. Sophie giggled. Some things never change. They slept beside her that night. Harvey's massive frame curled protectively against the foot of her bed. Lily curled against his chest, purring. And for the first time in years, Sophie slept the entire night without waking up once. Over the next few weeks, Harvey settled into his new rhythm. He woke with Sophie, walked the trails with Diane, and spent his afternoons stretched in the sun with Lily sprawled across his back like a warm scarf. They were like old souls who had always belonged together, reincarnated in fur and laughter. Neighbours stopped by just to visit. The story of the dog and kitten had now reached beyond Willow Ridge. People sent letters, small gifts, even paintings from children inspired by their bond. One little girl mailed in a picture of her own rescue cat with a note, "Harvey and Lily made me want to love animals more." Another person donated to the local shelter in honor of the golden dog who saved a crying kitten. And then, one Sunday afternoon, a soft knock came at the door. James. He stood on the porch with a paper bag in one hand and his eyes scanning the yard. "I figured it was time for a check-in." Diane smiled wide and opened the door. Harvey's ears perked up from the couch. Lily leapt down from the windowsill. They both bolted toward the door. Harvey barked once, sharp, happy, and James crouched just in time to catch the golden blur that crashed into his arms. "I missed you too, buddy," he laughed. Lily meowed, circling his leg. He reached down and scooped her up. "Still bossing him around, huh?" She purred in reply. James stayed for dinner. He sat at the table while Sophie showed him her latest drawing, another version of her Harvey and Lily series, this one of them flying through the sky with superhero capes. "They're saving the world," she said proudly. "I think they already did," James replied. That night, as he stood by the door to leave, James looked back one more time. Harvey lay beside the fire, Lily nestled between his paws, Sophie curled up on the rug with a book in hand. A family, born not of blood but of love, loss, and the miracle of second chances. Outside, James paused and pulled out his phone. He scrolled back to that first photo, the one from the clinic steps, a soaked golden retriever pressing his head gently into a box, a crying kitten inside. He stared at it for a long moment, then smiled, because now he understood. Harvey hadn't just been dropping off the kitten that day. He'd been delivering hope, and in the process, he had found healing too. Autumn wrapped Maple Hollow Road in amber and gold. Leaves blanketed the yard where Harvey and Lily played beneath the oaks, and the gentle rustle of wind stirred something even deeper within them, a rhythm of peace, of family, of belonging. Diane's house had never been this full of life. Each morning started with Sophie giggling as Lily darted across the kitchen floor chasing a crumpled paper ball. Harvey followed closely behind, tail wagging as if cheering her on, occasionally plopping down to let her leap off his back like a launch pad. Sophie called them "my little army of love," and no one dared to disagree. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the sky bled orange, Diane sat with Sophie on the porch, watching Harvey and Lily roll in the grass together. "Do you ever think Harvey misses the clinic?" Sophie asked, stroking Lily as she purred on her lap. Diane thought for a moment. "Maybe. But I think what he missed more was you." Sophie looked up, eyes soft. I think he waited for me. He did, sweetie, and while he waited, he helped someone else too. Sophie nodded slowly. Lily. Diane smiled. Exactly. He saved her so he could heal himself. And maybe, so he'd be ready to love you again when the time came. Harvey had become a local legend. The nearby elementary school invited Sophie to bring him in for Kindness Day. James even helped coordinate it, ensuring everything was safe and comfortable. When Harvey entered the classroom, tail swaying, kids gasped and clapped. And when Lily peeked out from Sophie's backpack, the room exploded in joy. Sophie stood in front of the class, holding Lily proudly in her arms. "This is Harvey," she said, beaming. "He found Lily when no one else cared, and he brought her to the clinic all by himself. He made sure she didn't die. That's what heroes do." Harvey lay at her feet. Lily meowed right on cue. A chorus of awes followed. After the visit, James pulled Sophie aside. "You did great today," he said. She blushed. "I was nervous." "You didn't sound nervous, you sounded brave." She looked up. "Harvey helps me be brave." James crouched beside her. "You help him too, more than you know." She smiled and ran ahead to the car, Lily's carrier bouncing lightly in her arms. James turned to Diane. "She's growing stronger." Diane nodded. "They all are." That night after dinner, Sophie laid a blanket on the living room floor. "Story time," she declared. Harvey ambled over and curled beside her. Lily pounced onto the blanket, then curled tightly into Harvey's side, one paw on his chest. Sophie opened her sketchbook and began to read her own hand-drawn comic about Harvey and Lily, superheroes saving lost animals across the world. Every few lines she looked over at them. "They'd never leave each other, right?" she asked. Diane sat nearby, knitting. "Never," she answered. "Not even when they're old and grey." Outside, a cool wind rustled the branches, but inside everything was warm, hearts, fur, and the kind of love that could only be born from loss and found again through trust. And as Sophie read aloud her next story, Harvey sighed contentedly. His mission had once been to protect one child, then to save a crying kitten. Now, somehow, he had done both. Winter came softly to Maple Hollow. The first snow fell in a hush, blanketing the fields in gentle white, muting the usual sounds of the town. From the window, Harvey watched as fat flakes drifted down. Beside him, Lily sat perched on the windowsill, tail flicking as her eyes traced every movement outside with fascination. Sophie burst into the room wearing snow boots and a thick scarf, cheeks red with excitement. "It's snowing!" she cried. "Harvey! Lily! Come see!" Harvey perked up immediately, his tail thudding the floor in slow, happy beats. Lily leapt from the sill and followed Sophie to the front door, a tiny pause barely making a sound on the wood floor. James had once warned Diane that Lily might not do well in the cold, but no one had told Lily that. Wrapped in a specially made kitten parka, Lily pranced through the snow like she'd lived her whole life in winter. She pounced on flakes, chased the little gusts of wind, and then retreated to Harvey's warmth when her toes grew too cold. Harvey was like a portable furnace, standing still whenever she crawled underneath him, letting her press her face against his thick coat, his golden fur now dusted with snow. They played like that for nearly an hour, Sophie throwing snowballs, Lily chasing them, and Harvey simply soaking in every second. He hadn't known happiness could stretch this wide, but now he felt it. In his bones, in his chest, in the peace that had replaced the ache. That night, Sophie had trouble falling asleep. Diane found her sitting up in bed, hugging Lily to her chest while Harvey lay on the floor beside them, head resting on his paws. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Diane asked gently. Sophie looked up. "What if they get old?" Diane blinked, surprised by the question. "I mean, what if something happens? What if I wake up and they're not here anymore?" Diane sat beside her and stroked her hair. "It's okay to worry, baby. But you know what? Love like this, what you have with them, it never goes away. Even when things change, it stays in your heart forever." Sophie glanced down at Harvey. Does he know that? Diane smiled. I think that's why he came back to you in the first place. Because he knew. Later that week, a small package arrived at the clinic addressed to James. Inside was a framed photograph, a snapshot of Harvey, Lily, and Sophie sitting in the backyard together, wrapped in a shared blanket. All three staring off into the distance, the light catching in their eyes. Tucked beside the frame was a note from Diane. You've saved more than a kitten, James. You saved a family. James stared at the photo for a long time before placing it in the center of the front desk for every visitor to see. He added a simple engraved plate beneath it. Found. Chosen. Forever. Back at Maple Hollow, as the snow fell steadily outside, Harvey and Lily curled up by the fire. Sophie, now asleep on the couch, breathed softly as the flames crackled nearby. Lily was growing. Harvey's muzzle had begun to silver around the edges. Time was moving forward, but nothing could shake what they had found in each other. Not the years, not the pain they had lived through, not even the long winter nights. Because now, they were home, together, always. Spring tiptoed into Maple Hollow on the backs of robins and crocus blooms. With it came soft rains, longer days, and the steady return of green life pushing through the earth. For Harvey and Lily, it was another season of joy, another chapter in their ever-growing bond. Lily had become a young cat now, graceful and agile, with her silvery grey coat thick and sleek. Yet despite her independence, she rarely strayed far from Harvey's side. She still curled into his fur every night, and during the day, she often perched on his back while they explored the backyard like the world's most unusual patrol team. Sophie began journaling their adventures in a spiral-bound notebook. She titled it, The Tale of Harvey and Lily, Guardians of Maple Hollow. Each entry chronicled their playful moments, quiet naps, and magical silences where nothing needed to be said. One morning she wrote, Harvey sat by the tulips today. Lily chased a bee and fell into his paws. They both rolled in the grass and made me laugh so hard I almost cried. I think love is like that. Soft and silly and something that finds you when you need it the most. At the clinic, James kept the photo of the trio in plain sight. Visitors often paused to look at it. Many recognized Harvey instantly. He had become something of a local legend, with people calling him the gentle golden guardian. James would smile and say, He came to us carrying more than a kitten. He carried love and grief, and somewhere in the middle, he found healing. One afternoon, a woman visiting from out of town teared up while reading the engraved plate under the photo. Found, chosen, forever, she whispered. That's what we all hope for, isn't it? James simply nodded. Meanwhile, Diane's garden began to bloom again. Harvey took to sitting beneath the lilac tree, the same spot he had first napped with Lily when they'd moved in. Now it was their sacred space. A small patch of sunlight, always warm, always quiet. Sophie began helping Diane plant new flowers along the fence. I think we should name this corner, she said, digging her trowel into the dirt. Okay, Diane said, glancing at Harvey and Lily. Sophie thought a moment, then smiled. Love's Landing. Diane's eyes softened. Perfect. They placed a hand-painted wooden sign on a post. Love's Landing Est, by Harvey Lily. That night, Sophie sat beside Harvey by the lilac tree and whispered, I used to be so sad, Harvey. But then you came back, and you brought Lily, and now I'm not scared anymore. Harvey looked up at her, tongue flicking out to kiss her cheek. Lily mewed and curled into Sophie's lap. Together they watched the sun dip below the hills, painting the sky in hues of gold and lavender. And for a moment, the whole world felt like it was holding its breath just to listen. By early summer, Harvey had become something of a celebrity in Maple Hollow. A local newspaper featured a weekend piece called The Dog Who Hugged a Kitten and Changed a Town, complete with a photo of Harvey lying beneath the lilac tree with Lily curled up in the crook of his body. The article sparked even more attention. Nearby towns began reaching out, asking if Harvey and Lily could visit for school programs and community events. Diane was protective. She didn't want their peaceful life turned into a spectacle, but Sophie, wise beyond her years, had an idea. "What if we just share their story?" she asked one afternoon, seated cross-legged beside the fireplace. "Like a book, a real one, for kids who are sad, or scared, or feel lost." James loved the idea. He helped Diane and Sophie begin drafting a children's story. The title? Harvey and Lily, The Hug That Healed. It told their journey simply. Harvey's heartbreak, Lily's cries, the rescue, the bond, and the healing they found together. But it wasn't just about pets. It was about grief, about love that survives loss, and about how even the most broken hearts can become someone's safe place. Sophie wrote the first page by hand in her journal. Once there was a big golden dog who lost something he loved. One day, he found a kitten who was crying in the cold. And when he hugged her, something inside both of them started to heal. Harvey sat beside her as she wrote, his head resting in her lap. Lily, as always, nestled between them, purring like a motorboat. Diane watched from the kitchen, hand on her chest, trying not to cry. That summer, Harvey and Lily became the official mascots of the county's Adopt with Heart campaign, a program designed to pair orphaned pets with families in need of emotional support. Posters went up in shelters, libraries, and clinics. Each one bore a photo of Harvey hugging Lily, and a simple message: "Love finds a way, let it find you." Thanks to their story, adoption rates in the county jumped 28% in 3 months. One local shelter even named a new kitten room the Lily Lounge, and the largest cage in the dog area, Harvey's Den. But back at Maple Hollow, Harvey and Lily didn't know any of this. They only knew the sounds of Sophie's laughter, the smell of fresh biscuits from Diane's kitchen, the way the wind rustled the lilac branches just before sunset. And they knew that when the world grew quiet and soft, they had each other. Always. The days grew longer, and the light in Maple Hollow stretched golden over every fence post and treetop. Life inside the little cottage had taken on the kind of peace that felt earned, like a breath held too long finally exhaled. Harvey now had a gentle stiffness in his back legs, age making its quiet entrance, but his spirit remained unshaken. He still greeted every morning with a slow stretch and a soft tail wag, especially when Lily bounced onto his back as if announcing, "Time to rise, King Harvey." Lily, now fully grown, still had the mischievous heart of a kitten. She dashed up curtains, chased moths through open windows, and swatted playfully at Harvey's ears until he gave in and joined her in whatever new adventure she imagined. And Sophie? Well, she had become the storyteller of them all. Every night before bed, she sat cross-legged on the floor with her sketchbook in her lap, Harvey at her side, Lily on his back, and read aloud new pages from the growing manuscript of The Hug That Healed. Diane listened from the next room, heart warmed with every word. One evening, James visited the house with a small surprise. A publisher, an actual children's book publisher, had seen the story online. They loved it. They wanted to help Sophie publish her book. Sophie's eyes widened. "Really?" James nodded. They said it made them cry, and that's how they knew it needed to be shared. Sophie leapt into Harvey's arms, literally, wrapping her arms around his neck as tears streamed down her face. "You did it, Harvey," she whispered. "You saved Lily, and now you're going to help more kids too." Harvey rested his chin on her shoulder and closed his eyes. The circle of healing was still widening. The next few weeks were a blur of excitement. Sophie, with James and Diane's help, polished the story, added watercolor illustrations she painted herself, and selected her favorite moments to highlight. Harvey sitting in the rain beside the box, Lily crying with her mouth wide open, the hug that started it all, and of course the moment Harvey and Sophie reunited. Each image carried weight, emotion, truth. No embellishment needed. Real love didn't require it. They decided to launch the book at the local library with a reading event called Hugs That Heal, a day with Harvey and Lily. Children from all over the county arrived with their parents. Some had just lost a pet. Others were fostering animals. A few just came to see the famous duo in person. Sophie, standing nervously at the podium, looked down at her furry best friends curled together on a cushion in front of her. Then she began to read. Once there was a dog with a heart too big for his own body. One day, that heart broke, and the only thing that saved him was a tiny kitten who needed him more than he knew. By the time she reached the end, half the audience was in tears. The librarian declared it the most attended and heartfelt event in the library's history. That night back at home, Sophie, Diane, Harvey and Lily lay on a blanket under the stars. I think we did something special, Sophie whispered, stroking Lily's soft ears. Diane looked up at the sky. I think your dad would be really proud. Sophie leaned into Harvey's shoulder. He always said love doesn't end. It just changes. Harvey licked her cheek. Lily purred, and all around them the summer breeze whispered softly through the trees, carrying the scent of lilac, warm grass, and something else. Peace. The seasons began to turn again, the way they always do, quietly, without asking permission. Summer bowed to autumn with crisp winds and golden light, and Maple Hollow blazed with colour. The leaves danced around Harvey and Lily each morning as they wandered the yard together, now more like old souls than playful youngsters, their bond deeper than fur or age. Harvey moved slower now. His steps were more deliberate, but he never strayed far from Sophie or Lily. In fact, he seemed to keep them even closer, as if each passing day mattered more now than the last. And in a way, it did. The children's book, The Hug That Healed, officially hit store shelves in late September. James hosted a launch event at the Willow Ridge Community Center. Families, teachers, rescue workers and children all poured in. There was a reading corner, a signing table, and even a photo wall filled with images of Harvey and Lily over the past year. Sophie wore a dress with tiny gold paw prints, and Lily rode in her custom satchel. Harvey walked beside her like a knight beside a princess, majestic, noble, and just a little greyed around the eyes. When Sophie stood at the front to read the final page, she paused. Harvey lay beside her, as he always did. But this time Sophie knelt beside him, placed her hand over his heart and said softly, Sometimes the world breaks your heart, but sometimes it gives you someone who knows how to hold it. The entire room stood still. Then, applause, tears, hugs. Harvey didn't understand the applause, of course, but he understood the warmth and the love, and that somehow his long journey from heartbreak had become something more than survival. It had become meaning. Back home that evening, Harvey and Lily rested together in the glow of the fireplace. The soft crackle of the logs echoed in the room, and outside, a gentle rain began to fall. Sophie sat nearby, writing in her journal. Diane brought in a plate of cookies, setting them on the table before sitting down beside her granddaughter. You did something important today, she said quietly. Sophie nodded. I just told the truth. Diane looked toward the fire. That's what makes it powerful. Sophie glanced at Harvey and Lily, curled into each other like pieces of the same soul. They're more than just a story now, she said. They're a promise. Diane tilted her head. A promise? Sophie nodded. That no matter how sad or scared or broken you feel, there's still someone out there who needs your love. And when you find them, you both get better. Diane smiled, her eyes wet. And in the hush of that moment, Lily lifted her head and licked Harvey's ear. Harvey didn't move, just sighed. Warm, safe, home. Winter came earlier than expected that year. The first snow dusted the yard before Halloween, catching the garden still holding on to its last golden petals. Sophie was already planning their holiday cards. This year she wanted to draw Harvey and Lily wearing scarves and sipping cocoa. Harvey had slowed even more. His walks were shorter and his naps longer, but he remained as loyal as ever. Each night he waited for Sophie to climb into bed before he settled in on the rug beside her. Lily refused to sleep anywhere else. Whether nestled into the curve of his neck or perched on his back, She followed him like a shadow stitched to his heartbeat. There was something deeper about their connection now. Not just playfulness or companionship. It was legacy. It was the way Lily curled around him when he coughed, or the way she'd watch him from across the room with those bright green eyes, alert to every twitch of his ears, every change in his breathing. She wasn't just the kitten he'd once saved. She had become his comfort now, his keeper, his mirror. James continued to visit often, sometimes with updates on book sales. The hug that healed was doing better than anyone expected. Other times just to sit on the porch and scratch behind Harvey's ears, watching the leaves fall in slow spirals from the maples. One evening, as James and Diane shared coffee by the fire, he leaned back and said quietly, "He's aging fast." Diane nodded slowly, her hands wrapped around her mug. "I know. He's happy, but I know," she said again. They looked over to where Harvey lay, Lily curled tight against his belly, her purring steady and loud. James sighed. "How do you prepare a child for that kind of goodbye?" Diane shook her head, eyes glistening. "You don't. You just love them hard enough that the goodbye hurts less." Later that night, Sophie sat cross-legged beside Harvey, Lily purring in her lap. She was drawing again. This time, a picture of Harvey with angel wings and hugging a smaller version of Lily. "I don't want you to leave," she whispered. "But I know you will someday. And when you do, I want you to find my dad and hug him too." Harvey opened one sleepy eye, then pressed his nose gently to her knee. A promise. Sophie leaned forward and kissed his head. "I'll keep Lily safe," she whispered, "just like you did." That winter, Harvey had more good days than bad, and on the bad ones, Lily didn't leave his side, not for food, not for toys, not even for Sophie's lap. She was his anchor now. Harvey had once saved Lily from death. Now Lily was helping him walk toward it with peace, with comfort, with love. One snowy morning, Sophie found Harvey sitting in his favorite spot by the lilac tree. He wasn't alone. Lily sat upright beside him, her tail curled protectively over his paw. Sophie smiled, and in her notebook that night she wrote, "Some love stories don't end. They just become part of the air you breathe, and the stories you tell, and the reason your heart feels full, even after they're gone." Harvey's breath had grown shallower, his movements slower, but his spirit remained unchanged. Each morning, even as winter deepened, he would lift his head at the sound of Sophie's footsteps, his tail thumping softly against the floor. He no longer had the energy for long walks, but he never stopped greeting her like she was the best part of every day, and Lily never left him, not once. She'd sleep curled against his side, nose tucked into his chest, her tiny paws rising and falling with each of his slow, deliberate breaths. The bond between them had become something sacred, something beyond understanding. It was Lily now who woke first, Lily who nudged him gently to rise, Lily who curled into the crook of his leg like a warm heartbeat beside his own. One evening James stopped by unannounced, holding a folder under one arm and a look of quiet reverence in his eyes. "I got something," he said to Diane. They sat by the fire, Harvey asleep nearby, Lily watching them with her eyes glowing in the flickering light. James opened the folder. Inside, proof pages. The Hug That Healed had been chosen for national distribution. A hardcover edition, full color, with Sophie credited as both author and illustrator, and a final page had been added. A tribute, a photograph of Harvey and Lily, asleep together, with a short dedication in Sophie's handwriting. "To everyone who's ever hurt and loved again, this story is yours too." Diane covered her mouth. Even Lily meowed softly as if she understood the moment's weight. James looked over at Harvey, whose ears twitched in his sleep. "He changed everything," he whispered. "He gave her a reason to believe again." Diane nodded, and she gave him a reason to stay. That night, a quiet snow fell, soft, gentle, blanketing the house and yard in white. Sophie stayed up later than usual, lying beside Harvey, her arm draped gently across his back, Lily nestled between them. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just listened to the rhythm of his breathing and pressed her forehead to his shoulder. In her journal she wrote, "If I could hold time in my hands, I would keep this night forever. Me, him, her, the snow, the fire, the hush of love wrapped around us like a blanket. And the way I know, deep in my heart, that Harvey will never really leave, because when someone saves your heart, they stay there." Morning came gently. Soft light spilled through the frosted windows of the house on Maple Hollow Road. Snow still clung to the tree branches like powdered sugar, and the hush outside carried into the living room, where the fireplace had long since gone to embers. Sophie stirred on the rug first. She had fallen asleep beside Harvey, her cheek resting on the thick fur of his side. Lily was curled between them, tucked tightly beneath Sophie's hand. At first everything felt the same, the warmth, the stillness, the comfort of being wrapped in something timeless. But then Sophie felt it. The stillness wasn't just peaceful. It was final. Harvey's chest did not rise. His breath no longer stirred the hairs of her arm. Sophie sat up slowly. Lily lifted her head, blinking. She looked at Harvey, then at Sophie, and then she crawled forward, curled into his chest and began to purr, not loud, not frantic, but low, steady, like a lullaby. Sophie placed her hand gently on Harvey's back. His body was still warm, his face peaceful, as if he had waited for that exact moment, for her warmth, for Lily's heartbeat, before he let go. Diane came in moments later. She saw Sophie sitting with Harvey and Lily, and the look in her granddaughter's eyes said everything. She knelt beside them, and together, in silence, they wept. Lily didn't move. She stayed pressed into Harvey's side for hours, refusing to leave, not even when James arrived, not even when the sun rose fully and lit the room in gold. James helped them carry Harvey's body to the backyard. They laid him to rest beneath the lilac tree, his favorite spot, where Lily used to sleep on his back and Sophie would read aloud in the grass. They wrapped him in the blanket Sophie had knit for him last spring. Lily lay beside the grave as James and Diane gently placed the soil. Sophie added one final touch, a small wooden sign painted with soft brush strokes. It read, "Harvey, our hug, our hero, our heart." And below that, "You saved us. We'll carry you forever." Lily didn't cry. Cats don't cry the way humans do. But for days, she slept beside the grave. She didn't eat much. She didn't play. And every night, she returned to the spot where Harvey had once curled around her and pressed her head to the grass. Sophie stayed with her. She brought blankets, snacks, books. She didn't ask Lily to move. She just stayed, because Lily had given Harvey peace, and now it was Sophie's turn to give that back to her. Weeks passed. Snow melted into soft, rich earth. The lilac tree at the back of the garden, once bare and brittle, now wore tiny green buds, early whispers of spring, and beneath it, the ground settled around Harvey's resting place. The little wooden sign Sophie had made stood firm, weathered slightly by wind and rain, but unchanged in message. Harvey, our hug, our hero, our heart. Lily no longer slept beside it every night, but she always visited at dusk. She'd curl up there for a moment, press her nose into the earth and purr softly, like a secret only she and Harvey still shared. Sophie had grown in more ways than her age could show. She no longer cried when she visited the tree. Instead, she talked. She'd sit cross-legged in the grass and tell Harvey about her day, how the book was doing, how school was going, how Lily had knocked another plant off the windowsill and looked proud doing it. And sometimes she read to him, especially the new story she had started to write. It was called Lily's Light. It began like this. Once there was a kitten who was saved by a hug. The hug came from a dog whose heart had been broken. But together they made each other whole. Lily had changed too. She still had her playful streak, still leapt from the bookshelf like a furry acrobat and pawed at moths in the evening light. But there was a quiet wisdom to her now. She took to sleeping on Harvey's old blanket. She still perked up when she heard his name. And when Sophie whispered, "You miss him too, don't you?" Lily would press her forehead to her cheek in answer. They grieved together, and healed together. On the first warm day of spring, Diane called James. She asked if he would help with a special project. So, on a Saturday morning, with help from neighbors, friends, and families who had been touched by Harvey and Lily's story, they gathered in the garden behind the cottage. They planted flowers around the lilac tree. They added a small stone bench beside Harvey's resting place. And just behind the tree, they built a little wooden archway. Above it, carved by hand, the hug garden in honor of the love that heals us all. That evening, Sophie stood beside the archway, holding Lily in her arms. She looked up at the blooming lilacs, then down at the earth where Harvey now rested, and she smiled. "You're still hugging us," she said softly. "Every day." Lily purred louder. That night, Sophie opened her journal one last time and wrote, "Harvey was more than a dog. He was my friend, my guardian. He taught me that even when we lose something we love, we carry the best parts of them forward in how we love, in how we protect, in how we heal others. And maybe that's what hugs really are. Not just arms wrapping around you, but hearts saying, 'You're safe now. I'm here. And I always will be.'" He came carrying pain. She came crying in the cold, but together they created something bigger than themselves, a love so deep it healed not just their own hearts, but everyone who came to know them. Harvey and Lily taught us that family isn't always who you start with. Sometimes it's who finds you when you need love the most. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Pawprints Forever. Drop a comment below to share your own story of an animal who changed your life, and help us keep Harvey's legacy alive, because sometimes a single hug really can change the world.